those here for the first time, please take a look at your Dharma request sheet. There's a handout inside the sutra text. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto sucedoye alahadi samya sambuddhoje. Namo sadanto sucedoye alahadi samya sambuddhoje. Together. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。The unsurpassed, deep, profound, subtle, wonderful Dharma in 100,000 million eons is difficult to encounter. Now that I've come to receive and hold it within my sight and hearing, I vow to fathom the thus come one's true and actual meaning. All Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master, Dharma Masters, and Dharma friends, good evening. Welcome to tonight's Sutra lecture. We are beginning our lecture on what is known as the Avatamsaka Sutra, considered the king of kings of sutras in Buddhism. And it's translated into English, the title, as the Buddha's Flower Garden Sutra of Great Expanded Teachings. And so what we do is to begin the sutra lecture is we first invoke the names of the sutra's title and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that accompany it. And the idea is that if we are very sincere, those, you could say, spiritual beings and great Bodhisattvas and Buddhas all will show up from the sincerity of our heart. So I invite everyone to join me in just chanting the Chinese text below. You'll see the English romanization. And it's a very simple tune, so after you hear it a couple times, I'm sure you'll be able to pick it up. 南无大方广佛华严经，华严乃为佛菩萨。南无大方广佛华严经，华严乃为佛菩萨。南无大方广佛华严经，华严乃为佛菩萨。南无大方广佛华严经，华严乃为佛菩萨。南无大方广佛华严经，华严乃为佛菩萨。南无大方广佛华严经，华严乃为佛菩萨。南无大方广佛华严经，华严乃为佛菩萨。So, good evening, everybody. Today is January 10th, 2015, and this is the second new sutra lecture for this year, 2015. So, welcome everybody here to the monastery, as well as those online. I don't know, do we have the number of how many people are online at the moment? Six people? Okay, so we have a smaller group tonight. I'm sure people are meditating at the City of 10,000 Buddhas during our chant session, or cultivating vigorously at home. Currently is a quiet time in the monastery. Here in the monastery, we're also doing a chant session. So today, we spent the whole morning and afternoon meditating, which is a very peaceful environment. So tonight, part of the theme actually will be a bit on meditation, because we're talking about deep prajna wisdom on the 6th ground Bodhisattva. We're on the 6th ground in a chapter called the 10 grounds of the Avatamsaka Sutra. And so this Bodhisattva is a Bodhisattva who is on the process of perfecting his wisdom. That's what the Bodhisattva on the 6th ground is doing. And so I invite you to open your text. We're on page, let's see here, 20 and 21. 20 and 21. We're on the very last third of the page. If people remember last week, we went over the 10-fold back and forth cycles of, in the Sanskrit, it's called pratitya samutpada in Sanskrit, which means dependent origination. And in this sequence, there's 12 links to it. There's 12, you could say, conditions, 12 things in the list that make up this conditioned arising that occurs. And so for those who are here for the first time, and also for those who have been here many times, we've been going over these 12 links for a long time. But they're so deep that I think it's not something you really can pick up on the first time, the second time, the 12th time, probably the 100th time, maybe something might go in. So what I think would still be valuable is if we went through the list just so people hear it again. And I wanted to give a kind of, you could say, clarification. For myself, I was doing some study on the 12 links and found some explanations, particularly by Bhikkhu Bodhi, which was very, very precise and helpful. So I was going to share that with everyone just so people could have that information. So do people know? So those who have been here all these weeks, hopefully you've memorized these 12 links, right? I won't look at the page, so I'll see how my memory works. First one. Anybody? Ignorance, yes, ignorance. Okay, ignorance conditions activities. Okay, activities here, so activities, right? So what's the third one? Ignorant activities, conditions, consciousness. Yes, consciousness. Consciousness conditions name and form, nama rupa, name and form. Okay, number 5. What is the condition? Anybody? 6 sense organs, very good. We're kind of moving. You can kind of think about a process of coming into existence. 6 sense organs. Yeah, I'll go over them in a bit. Let's go over the list real quick. 6 sense organs, conditions, contact. Okay, we got everybody, all the answers over here. Contact conditions. He has a computer. You have a computer. You're looking at the screen? Okay. Contact conditions. Think about feelings conditions. Not quite, yeah, love or craving. And then the next one is grasping, clinging. And then that conditions existence, which conditions birth, which conditions old age, sickness, death, and the whole mass of suffering. That's how sometimes said.
So for those of you, if this is your first time encountering the 12 links, it's basically the Buddha's description or his observance of the human condition. It explains in these 12 links why we exist. And within it then is the secret of how to get out of this cycle of samsara. So if we can contemplate the 12 links to success, then we would have been able to end our own, be in control of our own destiny.
Yeah. This is actually really, really, really important. I think people know that I've been studying a bit in the university, and so reading a lot of Western philosophy, and they talk a lot about, what can we know, what's existence, etc., etc. And in fact, I think if you really want to look at Buddhism, the 12 links is where the Buddha is extremely precise on what's actually happening. And I think a lot of those questions that philosophers have debated back and forth all these years, actually can, if you really use the 12 conditioned links as a reflection, it can answer a lot of questions about, you could say, what our life actually about. And it's not doing it in a kind of a rosy tinted way, to kind of like believe this and everything will be okay. It says it's just like this, and if you look into your own mind, you'll see how that happens in your own mind, and I can tell you how to free yourself from it.
How it happens right now.
Yeah, how it happens right now.
In all our minds.
Okay, so just to quickly explain those 12 links, if it's the first time you've heard it, the idea is that this is one way of looking at it is that it spans 3 lifetimes. So people know that Buddhism talks about, past lives, future lives. So one way of explaining this is through 3 lifetimes. And we saw that in the previous sections, or for instance, in this section right here, it's number 6, says the past, present, and the future. That was one of the contemplations the Bodhisattva does in the middle of the page, the past, present, and future. You can say it's the past life, the present life, and the future life. And so what the Buddha was explaining was basically how this process continues on. So this says the past life is related to the first 2, which is ignorance and activities. So those are the past life. Ignorance being, we just don't know what's going on. How did we get here? I don't know. There's this ignorance. And activities is these kind of very deep habitual patterns, these kind of very deep, we call it samskaras, these habitual patterns about how we do things. It's almost, you could say, like this really deep unconscious. And that is what brings forth the consciousness. And the consciousness is where new life begins. So this says that our present life goes from consciousness to existence. So consciousness to existence. And then the future life is birth, old age, sickness, and death. So basically, if you look at it, you have the past life, which is the first 2, and the future life, which is the last 2, and everything in between is the present life. And so what I actually wanted to focus on particularly was this present life, because I mentioned it last time, and I got something that I thought was very helpful in terms of clarification about how to look at the 12 links, looking particularly at the present life. And basically, if you look at those links from the present, starting from consciousness being this, the consciousness that we use to discriminate, to perceive what's going on, to all the way to existence, there's a way you break it up to being, what are the results, what happened from my previous karma that I did, what are the resulting karma, and what's the creative karma, what are the things that I'm doing now which is going to propel me into the future. So that sounds a little bit complicated. If I were to make it another way, you could maybe see, where do I actually have freedom in my life? Where do I actually have control of my life? And the resultant part of your life, you don't have that much control over, because it comes from our habitual patterns in the past. So for instance, let me just make it very concrete. I see this room, right? So this information is coming into my senses and I see what's going on. And I actually have all the way from consciousness to where the link is to feeling. I have the sensation of, I like it, I don't like it. That to that point, it's all resultant karma from the past coming in and coming into my senses. Then there's a flip, that when I move to craving, or somebody said love, this kind of wanting to get more of it or attracted to it, then I'm planting the seeds for future karma, for the habitual patterns for the future. So it's actually very interesting to think about that way, is because basically everything that's coming in, we don't, unless we have very deep, profound insight, and we can break the ignorance at the very beginning, we just kind of take it, that's what's coming in. And it's hard to go and actually change that. But where we actually can change it is at that next movement, which is that craving. And if we could stop the craving, then we're not planting new seeds that's going to, you could say, bind us up, chain us down in this habitual process. It'll free us from these habitual processes in the future. So you could say Buddhism, there's always this kind of debate, as I mentioned in Western philosophy, about what's predestined and what's free will, etc., etc. You can kind of see that basically before all that resultant things is a little bit like what's quote unquote predestined. It's already kind of set. How these things come in, how I'm going to like or dislike it, I don't have that much control over. But that next moment of craving is where we can exercise our actual freedom to kind of say, okay, I don't want to follow that. I'll do something else. Like for instance, maybe another very practical example of, if you can talk about cultivation, is let's see, I see somebody that I don't like. He's walking down and, I don't like. And rather than dwell in it and get more and more involved with it, I can think to myself, maybe I should have more loving kindness for that person and kind of be kind and kind of generate this heart of loving kindness, right? And that changes my course of my mind from this kind of negativity to something that's positive. Or similarly, if I see something I like, don't say I'm going to go steal it, but I might say, that's somebody else's, I won't take it. Or if I have a Dharma method, I can just recite the Buddha's name. If you watch your breath, you can watch your breath. If you recite Guanyin Bodhisattva's name, whatever you do as your Dharma practice, then you don't let your mind go out. So that's where the mindfulness is very helpful, because basically when our mind moves out in that way, we can catch it and then we don't follow it. So for those who have been doing some of the Chan session here, especially in the morning, the afternoon, I think what's really great about Chan meditation is you can start seeing this process in your own mind, and a little bit of space develops around it. I always felt like a really great thing to watch, because all of a sudden the mind, the strength of the mind to be able to focus on something increases. So these things kind of become more and more apparent. Because usually these things happen so fast, there's no chance to even get any handle on it. But when you get it to sit quietly, you have a chance to say, oh, I can not follow it. And then you have a little bit of freedom, So that's what I say. That's where the 12 links really are a skillful teaching for us, who especially we want to cultivate and meditate to get free of this process.
I'll just re-explain.
Okay, yeah.
So excuse me. So last evening when Jin Chuan Shu explained what he just spoke about for the last 5 minutes, he used different words, which made me understand it easier. So I thought I'd just give a different version of what he just said. So please correct me if I get it wrong. So basically what Jin Chuan Shu is saying, that all our reactions to things that we see, that we hear, that we taste, all the 6 senses, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and how the mind reacts, has all been built up by who you are. The way you were raised, the principles that you hold on to, what is right, what is wrong, the books that you have read, the things that you learned from your friends, from your parents, your principles, the stories you tell yourself about who you are. That's karma. So all that has shaped how we see things. So I would see something very differently from how you would see something. Everyone sees things differently. So I see this. I see a cup. And it might remind me of a memory that I had. Maybe my father had the same cup. Looking at the Chinese characters doesn't mean anything to me because I don't read Chinese. For someone else, they see this, and the first thing they might do is look at the characters. Oh, that means this, that means that. It comes from here, it comes from there. So everyone perceives things differently. And the initial response that you have, sometimes when you meet someone and there's an instant connection, sometimes you see someone and you just don't like them, just like that. So all that is shaped by our karma, which is, in other words, who we are, how we see things. And that's what makes us unique. But from then on, what we decide to do with it. So say if I know that broccoli is good for me, and I'm supposed to eat broccoli, but I have this natural tendency not to want to eat broccoli because I don't like broccoli or Brussels sprouts, but it's really good for me. So if I continue my tendency, I hate broccoli, blah, 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 I'm just perpetuating my habitual way of seeing broccoli, and it's not going to help me. But if I know that I have to eat broccoli because it's good for me, and say if I'm coughing right now and it's going to cure my cough, perhaps by changing my perception about broccoli, broccoli is really tasteless, but it's really good for me. And maybe if I eat it with a meal, it might taste better. And I adjust my perception. And then from then on, whenever I see broccoli, it is no longer an aversion, but broccoli, yeah, not bad. Is that kind of okay?
That's one way to do it, for sure. That's one way to do it for sure. And so I think you can look at it at different stages. So I think the first stage for sure is probably we probably want to transform our mind to move towards wholesomeness, to goodness. For instance, like eating broccoli probably wouldn't be a bad thing, and eating what we often hear, try to be vegetarian, so we say eat a little bit less meat would be good too.
I can only do simple stuff.
Yeah. So that'd be good, is in terms of just we try to keep a healthy, wholesome lifestyle, but particularly though for the Buddha, he's also saying something else, is that if we actually want to be liberated from this process, then we can actually be liberated from it entirely, and that's actually beyond our habits. So if that makes sense, is that basically we can I don't know how to explain it. It's like you're doing something and you're not doing it out of habituation. You're doing it out of, we sometimes say the awakened nature, this kind of spontaneity. Sometimes it's kind of spontaneity. We often see, sometimes we associate with artwork, really great art comes from this kind of inner place that's, it's not a habitually conditioned thing coming out. It's not a perfect analogy, but there's a sense that what the Buddha is saying is that first what we do is what Jing Husher said was, if we can transform our perceptions to be in alignment with how things are, and cultivating our habits to be in alignment with how things are, that's useful as a first step. And then ultimately, we can empty that. We can get free of that entirely. And then we're completely in tune with the reality of what's going on, naturally, effortlessly. We don't have to use our conditioned mind to do it. And we're actually going to go into that in this upcoming passages, exactly what we're going to be talking about. Yeah. Okay? Okay, so for that, let's start the sutra lecture. So actually, just first question, do people have any questions about that? I just wanted to, yes?
So is it like meeting broccoli for the first time?
Meeting broccoli for the first time.
And taking broccoli as it is?
As it is, yeah, before you make any discrimination. So her comment was, it's like taking broccoli for the first time in your life and taking broccoli as it is.
I have an interesting story. I remember when I was about maybe 3 or 4 years old, and in my home we had a lot of books, and some of the books that we have was a series of books on nature, on insects, on animals, on trees, plants, and they were full-page photographs. And I remember one of the books on insects, and I was very young at that time, and just based on my instinct, I could never touch the page that had the insects because it would freak me out. Insects freak me out, especially large insects. And being a book, the insects would be big, right, in the photos. So I remember I would just touch the edge of the page with my finger and flip it over. And that's one memory I have when I was very young. And it stuck with me because it's something I couldn't explain. My fear of large insects, which I still carry on to this day. Yeah, but I have a bit more self-control now. So if a large insect would land on me, inside I would be freaking out, but outside I'll just try to play it cool and not move. Yeah, but I've had that happen to me before, and I was jumping up and down, and yeah. So I can't explain that. Yeah.
Actually, just to reflect on that, you're saying if you're eating broccoli for the first time, it's interesting because I actually think probably most kids eating broccoli for the first time has a bad experience. I don't know if that's true or not, and that maybe that's why people have it's one of those kind of veggies that the parents are always like trying to force the kids to eat, or maybe we get it from advertising. I don't know. We get advertised other stuff, so then we don't want to eat broccoli, but what I see is that if you look with this process, is what it's saying is that you're having this sensation of taste, right? You're putting this in your mouth. There's a sensation of taste. There's a sensation of flavor, and there's a like or dislike or neutral sensation that occurs when that happens. Now, that's coming from your habitual process in the past. So maybe some kids, from their habits from the past, we can say either past lives or maybe they were brought up, somehow their parents convinced them as a really young kid that, broccoli is really great tasting thing. So so they think it's really great tasting, so they eat it and it's a very happy experience, right? And they kind of continue on that process. Or they can have a habitual process which is negative to it, and then they try to reject it. So what the Buddha is saying is, to that point of liking or disliking, it's already conditioned from your past. But what you want to do, if you want to change for the future, is that next link, which is craving. So if you want to change your habit of let's say, not liking broccoli, then you don't have aversion for it. You catch your mind before you have like, this is nasty, and you spit it out, and then you hide it under the table or something. The more actions you take around it, the deeper the habitual patterns you put into your mind are. That's how it works. So, the most extremes you can see is when people get into like these really obsessive kind of behaviors, or obsessive fears, is when it gets carried to the most extreme. But it all starts with a thought. If we can catch it in the very beginning, then we don't get tied up by it. So this is where the Buddha's insight is very helpful, and where meditation becomes super essential, is because you can see that if we can see our minds more clearly and catch the moment of thought earlier, then we can actually control our destinies, but where we're going. Otherwise, to be real honest, what happens is these 12 conditioned links just go on and on and on, and we're just like robots, just going through life. And I think a lot of, actually in Western philosophy, I think there's a lot of thought of like, maybe we are robots, what's this all about? And I think the Buddha says, if we don't really use any awareness, then our habitual pattern is just what's pushing us along all the time. We never get free. But if we really try to apply energy with our mind, look inward, and apply intention, we can actually free ourselves. And so he's saying, this is how you do it. And so although it seems a little bit of like, as I said, this part is a little bit, what do you say, not mechanistic, it's very like step by step. It's not like a story or something. It's very matter of fact. But because of how matter of fact it is, it's just very precise, telling you something like a scientific, step by step process. This is just what happens. This is just what happens. So what are you going to do? It's like a formula. Yeah, it's like a formula. It's just telling you how it works. It's not going to be really beautiful. It's not really attractive. It's not really inspiring. It's just, this is just what happens. And now what do you want to do with it is up to us. How do we want to study it? How do we want to apply it in our lives? It's up to us. So, okay. Yeah, so let's go into the text for tonight, because we also have a very rich topic this evening, which is on the liberation doors, the 3 liberation doors. So if we could start on the bottom of page 20, it starts with the F-O-Z-I, 佛子. So I'll read the section, and then people can repeat after me. Okay. 佛子, 菩萨摩诃萨, 以如是十种相, 观诸缘起, 知无我, 无人, 无寿命, 自性空, 无作者, 无受者, 即得空解脱门现在前. Okay, on the English side, disciples of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, using those 10 kinds of marks, contemplates all arising from conditions. He knows it all has no self, no others, no lifespans, and is empty of a nature of its own. And there is no doer and no receiver. And right then, the liberation door of emptiness manifests before him. Want to read all 3? Okay, yes, let's read. So these comes in a set of 3. So we'll read the next 2 paragraphs as well. So the next section in Chinese, 观诸有智皆自性灭, 毕竟解脱, 无有少法相, 有少法相身, 即是得无上解脱门现在前. The English together. He contemplates the limbs of existence as all in their own nature, being extinguished and ultimately liberated without the production of the slightest mark of dharmas. And right then, the liberation door of marklessness manifests before him. Okay, and then next page, page 22. Okay, maybe we could do the Chinese together. 如是如空无相疑，无有缘求，唯除大悲为首，教化众生，即时得无愿解脱门现在前。菩萨如是修三解脱门，离彼我相，离作者受者想，离有无想。Okay, together with English. Once he has in that way entered emptiness and marklessness, he has no hopes or expectations, except for taking great compassion as foremost, to teach and transform sentient beings, and right then the liberation door of wishlessness manifests before him. The Bodhisattva, through that kind of cultivation of the three doors of liberation, becomes free from thoughts of self and others, free from thoughts of doer and receiver, and free from thoughts of existence and non-existence.
So what we just read is called the three doors of liberation, meaning the door of liberation of emptiness, the door of liberation of signlessness, or sometimes marklessness is also used, and the third one is the door of liberation of wishlessness. So the first one, right? So basically, what this means is that these three doors allows you to see things as the way they are, reality. And the Buddha's description of reality is that things are not permanent. Everything that is made from conditions is not permanent. And he described it as inconstant, which is always changing, always changing. And he described it as the five skandhas: form, feeling, formation, perception, and consciousness. So the first one, form, means everything that we see. What we hear, what we see, what we can taste, what we can smell, what we feel, feelings, and the rest are processes of the mind as this sensory input come in, and then how the mind takes all these sensory inputs, including thoughts that are generated by the mind itself. So basically, it's reality as we know it. So Buddha said that all this is firstly impermanent or inconstant. Second, it is not satisfactory, or sometimes translated to as the Pali is dukkha, excuse me, which means suffering, not satisfactory, doesn't hit the spot. You may get some satisfaction for a while, but give it some time and you yearn for something more. It's that inner, that yearning always for something more. Not being able to just be fully happy and contented with where you are right now. And the third one is they bring suffering. So if we unpack that just a bit, for example, impermanent, inconstant. This morning, all I had was a sore throat. And then after lunch, my sore throat developed. On top of my sore throat came this wonderfully uncomfortable sinus headache, which felt as if my whole head was filled with someone put a water hose in my ear and turned it on. And then I started coughing. Inconstant. The body changes from one moment to the other. Fingernails grow longer. And impermanence, eventually, this body is going to betray me. It will say, bye-bye. Impermanence.
Okay, so what? Just to I actually find it helpful because Jing Husher says one thing and then he translates what I said to something that's more understandable. And I think it's helpful to get different perspectives on the same thing. So what I think we had a discussion about the Dharma the previous evening, and what he said I thought was really helpful was basically that these three liberation doors come from three different types of contemplation. So basically, how do you get liberated? Is you do three practices, which Jing Husher just described. So what are the three liberation doors? One is, the first one we see is the liberation door of emptiness. And so if you look at it, what is actually being contemplated to get through that door of liberation? It's not immediately obvious, but it's not self. That there's no self. There's no essential ourselves. It says here's no self. I mean, for me, there's nothing that's really Jing Chuan. I mean, what's Jing Chuan? Is this his body? I mean, when this body dies, what happens? Is it the thoughts in my mind? I mean, what is it there, right? And then it empties out also what's outside, right? The nature, no others. So there's not other people, no others, no lifespans, and is empty of a nature of its own. So, and there's no doer and no receiver. And right then, the liberation door of emptiness manifests before him. So that's the link. The not self-teaching, not self-contemplation links up with the liberation door of emptiness. Now, the following two is the similar. There's a liberation door of marklessness. Marklessness meaning, there's nothing that has a form that you can hold on to, right? It's markless. And how do you get there? Is by contemplating impermanence. Things are constantly changing. And then the last one is the liberation door of wishlessness, of not having any craving or desires to go out and get something. Where does that come from? That comes from a contemplation of dukkha, of unsatisfactory, which makes sense, because if you see, wow, everything outside is ultimately unsatisfactory, then your heart doesn't go out to want to grab it anymore, because you go, this doesn't satisfy me, why would I grab it, right? But because we confuse ourselves and we think it will satisfy us, we grab it and we hold on to it and we won't let it go until somebody forces away from us and we get really afflicted. So what the Buddha is saying is basically why these are liberation doors is because this is the nature of reality, and when we don't perceive it the way it is, we suffer. We get ourselves into trouble. That's what he's saying is, now I'm going to teach you basically how to get out of it. And these are the contemplations, and the 12 links is one way you could see it. So if we look at the first link, the first principle, which is not self, and how that connects to emptiness, if you look at those 12 links that we just went through a moment ago, the 12 links has no self in it anywhere, right? We went through ignorance, activities, consciousness, the name and form, 6 sense organs, down to contact, feeling, craving, clinging, existence, birth, old age, sickness, and death, right? That whole process, where can you say there's a self? Where can you say that's who I am? No, what he's saying is this is this constant flow of conditions that are just going through all the time, and just flowing through, and you think somewhere in there is you, but really it's just all in a flow. So that's the contemplation of not self from the 12 links.
So on a superficial level, it would be, who am I? The basic question of all philosophers, who am I? And so someone might say, am I who I tell myself am I? Am I who my parents think I am? Am I who my friends think I am? Social media? Am I shaped by the magazines or popular trends? Or do I really see myself for who I am? And then you start asking, am I the sum of my thoughts? Or am I judged by my actions? And then you go deeper and deeper, and you try to look for something that's permanent, something that's solid, a sense of self, in not just yourself, but in your thoughts, in things, and you slowly break down and analyze each process one by one.
So that's the looking inward, and so what the Buddha came to was these 12 links that you really can't find anything in that permanent way. If you want to follow that line of thought, I thought one very interesting contemplation, they say what conceals not self from us is that we think things are solid. We think things are solid. So we don't see that, actually, first one's continuity. We think, okay, so let me describe it this way. The one way that it confuses us is that we think that there's something that continues on that's always like this way all the time. But in fact, no two moments of existence are exactly the same. We think they're the same sometimes. So for instance, one example they give is, let's say we're in like a room and slowly the temperature increases little bit by little bit by little bit. We might never really notice that something really changed, right? But if you look from the beginning and the end, something changed fairly drastically. But through that whole process, it was done really gradually. We don't catch it. Same as our growing up, this moment and next moment, am I the same person? Not the same. Everything is changing inside, but I feel like I'm the same. I think it's the identical thing that's continuing on. So our confusion comes from that equation of what was happened before, and this next thing is exactly the same. It's not. It's constantly in flux, and we don't see that constant change. So we can create this kind of idea of a self that continues on. So that's one kind of contemplation. I think the other way I wanted to come at it was maybe more from seeing how this is one very helpful teaching to liberate us from the common sufferings of our existence. Namely, what Jing Hasher said was oftentimes we associate who I am with who I see in the mirror, right? I go in front of the mirror and I go, I got a pimple now here, or like, how's my hair, As a monkey, I have a little bit less of that. We have less things to worry about. But, there's still a sense of who am I? What am I? And you attach to the form. A lot of people look for body image, There's a kind of an ideal form for females and then a kind of ideal form for males. And that gets perpetuated by the culture you're in. Every culture has a kind of a different body image. And then you try to shape yourself to that. And I think when you really looked at that with a kind of a objectivity, a kind of just a reflecting on it, you can see the amount of suffering involved in it if you're completely wrapped up in it. It's not to say, you don't care about your appearance at all and you just kind of end up being this kind of haggard-looking person, but you don't get so wrapped up in it and you think that's who you are, that when something doesn't quite go right, or say, for instance, you grow old and you're trying to cover your old skin up with, whatever oil or things, and this doesn't work, you get really frustrated. You go, no, I understand. This is just life. This is how the process goes. And so that's the contemplation. That you go, okay, I'm not going to attach myself there. You can not attach yourself in the reputation that you have with your friends or your family, because at the same time, that comes and goes. It's not something that you want to attach to. If you do, then probably you're going to be very easily moved by flattery, and then if somebody criticizes you, you get really upset. Right? I see it in myself, is there's somebody says good things about me, I somehow think that conversation went really well. That was a really good conversation, because they really liked me, and then somehow they really were unhappy with me, like, something, I must have said something wrong, I start worrying about it. And where I'm worrying about is myself. I'm not worried about if I said anything really by principle or really was beneficial. I was worried about the impression I gave to somebody else. The kind of where I attached to some kind of self that I was trying to protect. So this idea, I think, is a very useful idea for us to just reflect on, is where do I put my attachments in to create a self? And the Buddha is saying, if we can slowly let go of that, we will find a liberation door of this kind of emptiness. And the emptiness that the Buddha is talking about isn't a really scary emptiness of this kind of meaninglessness, nothingness, kind of nihilism. The Buddha is very clear, he's not teaching nihilism. In fact, this emptiness is a very wonderful, sometimes I say true emptiness is wonderful existence. And I think Jing Hasher was going to talk about emptiness.
So you done with it yourself? So I was looking at this line, and emptiness, the ground of emptiness is where all bodhisattvas operate from, especially the bodhisattva on the first stage. But the word emptiness itself is quite misleading, because I used to interpret emptiness as empty, like a void, like vacuum, nothing existing whatsoever. So I used to think that existing in emptiness would be like wood, like dead wood, just totally inert. But then, as Jin Chuan Shu said, the Rebel Master had a verse that says, at a sentence, in true emptiness there's wondrous existence. So I began investigating further about emptiness, and the first thing I found or realized is that it's called emptiness because it's beyond what our conscious mind can conceive. So what the mind that we're using to think right now, the mind that you're using to listen to me right now, it's beyond what this mind, this human mind, can conceive of. So that's why it's called empty. It's empty of all the nature of our mind, the nature of how we think, which is based on duality, discrimination, such as, I like this, I don't like that, I'm okay with that, I really, really like that. That makes me happy, that makes me sad, that makes me angry, that thing will probably make me jealous. All these ways we interpret reality and that distorts reality. Emptiness means it's empty of all those discriminations. So what does it mean then for someone to actually enter the state of emptiness? Well, for this because it's beyond what the conscious mind can conceive of, right? So for this we have to look at different texts. And the first one that came to my mind is the Heart Sutra, which we recite in the Buddha Hall every day. And it says, when the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara was practicing the... Oh, I thought it was my ears. Okay, so it says, when the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara was practicing the profound prajna paramita, he illuminated the 5 skandhas and saw that they're all empty, and he crossed beyond all suffering and difficulty. So the first cue that I get from this is he crossed beyond all suffering and difficulty. So no more suffering, no more difficulty. What kind of a life is that? It's pretty nice. So if we deconstruct this sentence, when he was practicing the profound prajna paramita, meaning he was practicing towards wisdom, he eliminated the 5 skandhas. Light is used to represent wisdom in the sutras. What does that mean? It means that if you are ignorance, darkness is used to represent ignorance. So if you're in the dark room, totally pitch black, and you're trying to navigate your way to a door or a window to get out, you most likely hurt yourself. When I was growing up, I was living in the estates, and the electricity there sometimes would go out at night. And I remember the first thing is you panic, because suddenly everything's black, and I was a child then. And then secondly, you try to remember where the flashlights were. And as you make your way to the flashlights, I would hit my toe on furniture, or I would hit a table, and eventually I get the flashlight. But once I turn on the flashlight, when I have light, I can illuminate my way and navigate myself safely to where it is I needed to go. So, he illuminated the 5 skandhas. Earlier we spoke about the 5 skandhas, which is all reality and all processes of the mind. So what it means by illuminating the 5 skandhas is he saw through, he understood, he saw them for what they were. He saw reality for what it was. And he saw that they're all empty. So empty of how our mind, with all these filters, all the stories that we tell ourselves, empty. Push that all to one side. Thoughts of the self and all that. And he came to a place where there was no suffering and no difficulty. So this is a very short sentence. And then now we can look to the Lankavatara Sutra. And this is the first few pages where there's a person asking the Buddha questions. Or I think the Bodhisattva Mahaprajna. So it's a question and answer session. So this person had a lot of questions to ask about the world, about reality, and his name was Lord of Lanka. And after he has finished all these questions, he received the answers one by one. And a wondrous thing happened when he heard the last answer. He experienced emptiness. His wisdom opened up. And this is how it is described in the sutra. It says, with this, the Lord of Lanka felt an awakening and transformation of his consciousness, as he realized what appeared was nothing but the perceptions of his own mind, and he found himself in a realm free from such projections. Due to the stockpile of good karma from previous lives, he suddenly gained an understanding of all teachings, the ability to see things as they really are and not how others see them, how to examine things with his own wisdom while remaining free from discursive views. Okay, I'll repeat that and explain line by line. So it says, with this, the Lord of Lanka felt an awakening and transformation of his consciousness. It means his consciousness from the mundane consciousness that we all use, the sixth consciousness, it changed. And what did he change to? He realized that what appeared was nothing but the perceptions of his own mind. So he realized everything was just his own mind, percepting things. And as you perceive, the mind changes. And he found himself in a realm free from such projections. So that filters all that, like now when you're listening to me, you're not listening to what I'm saying, you're listening to your mind figuring out what I'm saying, right? So if I use words like karma, so if there's a Hindu priest here and I use words like karma, the Hindu priest will, yep, very good. Because that's a concept that he's familiar with. But if I bring someone else who has not heard about Buddhism before and I use words like karma, his understanding of karma will be totally dependent on what he knows. And he may say, this guy, no, I'm not going to listen to him. Or that sounds interesting, but it just sounds like some theory he cooked up. So different people have different ways of listening. So, but him, the Lord of Lanka, found himself in a realm free from such projections. So he encountered reality as it was. He saw things as it is. And due to the stockpile of good karma, meaning he has developed good habits, maybe he meditates a lot, he has a very calm mind, he doesn't get angry, he has a lot of patience, he suddenly gained an understanding of all teachings because now he perceives things directly. He saw reality as what it was and not how others see them. That happens to me all the time. Someone tells me, Chinchuan tells me, hey, this book is really good, it's really profound, you have to read it. And then I start reading the book, but I've been influenced by how he sees things. Of course, what the Lord of Lanka experienced is really deep. But on a very superficial level, a lot of the things I see, a new car and the way it's advertised, influence me. A pen, if you tell me this pen, I look at the pen, I'm not familiar with the brand, but suddenly if I see someone like Brad Pitt in the magazine, oh, maybe that pen maybe that's a really good brand. We get influenced by how other people see things. Do we see things our way, or the way we see life shaped by all the sensory input that we get in? So the Lord of Lanka is free from all those. And he knows how to examine things with his own wisdom while remaining free from discursive views. Discursive views, again, the way our mind thinks. I like this pen, but it doesn't have a brand, and if I put it in my pocket, people see it, they think, this guy, he doesn't have any taste, he's not, I'm not going to attract any girls, blah, 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 blah. Discursive views. He's free from all that chatter in the mind that doesn't lead anywhere. So that's the Lankavatara Sutra. That's how they explain someone who just experienced emptiness. And then in the Sixth Patriarch Sutra, in the introduction, it says, our basic nature, according to the Sixth Patriarch, is non-attachment, and it blossoms only when it flows freely, clinging to nothing. To be empty is to be free of insecurity, anxiety, and gnawing sense of lack. So you don't have any anxiety, you never feel insecure, you're always very cool, calm and confident, and you don't have a sense of lack. No matter where you are, what you do, you are fine. You are totally solid. You don't have something that tells you, I think I need to go out, I need to go rent a movie, or I need to check my phone, I need to check Facebook, or whatever social media is in the in thing right now. I don't need to listen to music to take my boredom away because I don't even have boredom. I'm just totally fine. Buddhist emptiness paradoxically then must be read not as dark extinction, but as a light-filled fullness of existence. Knowing that there is not a single thing that can be obtained leads not to the dead end in my potent. So there is not a single thing that can be obtained is another way to describe emptiness. but to an unexpected flourishing of an encumbered freedom, joy, and wisdom. So you're not like, it's not like I used to think, a piece of dead wood, but unencumbered, free, freedom, joy, and wisdom. To me, it's kind of like a dream where I'm at the beach and I realize I have $10 billion in my account. I'm surrounded by all my friends, really, really good friends. Nobody in this world dislikes me. I'm everyone's best friend. I'm popular. My family's there. No one falls sick. No one dies. That kind of feeling. That really comfortable, confident feeling. And then we come to a circle back to the sutra, the first ground. So now we're on the sixth ground. I would like to introduce this first ground again because the first ground marks the Bodhisattva's first entry into emptiness. And the sutra describes it as, excuse me, when Bodhisattvas dwell on the ground of happiness, they accomplish much happiness, much pure faith, much delight, much bliss, much elation, much enthusiasm, much courage, much freedom from contention, much absence of troubling and absence of anger. So this is the experience of someone on the first ground. Happiness, faith or confidence in yourself and in the teachings, delight, bliss, elation, enthusiasm, courage, freedom from contention. When someone says something, someone does something, it never ever upsets you. Tinshanshu could be doing this. After 5 minutes, I'm still cool. After 20 minutes, I'm still fine. After 10 hours, I'm still fine. Someone says, you bald-headed vegetarian monk. I'm fine. That's how it is in emptiness. No contention at all. No one can move your mind to anger, to hatred, to ill will. You're just perfectly in control. And then it says, disciples of the Buddha, when bodhisattvas dwell on the ground of happiness, they give rise to happiness because so these are the reasons, okay, why they're happy. They give rise to happiness because they're mindful of all the Buddha's dharmas. That means they know reality as they see it. They give rise to happiness because they're mindful of all bodhisattvas. They give rise to happiness because they're mindful of bodhisattvas' practices. They give rise to happiness because they are mindful of the purity of all paramitas. They give rise to happiness because they are mindful of the supremacy of all the bodhisattvas' grounds. They give rise to happiness because they are mindful of all the bodhisattvas' indestructibility. They give rise to happiness because they are mindful of the thus come one's teaching and transforming of living beings. They give rise to happiness because they are mindful of the ability to benefit living beings. This all previously is, the mind is always mindful of wisdom and always doing the right thing at the right time. You know when to say the right words, you know when to keep quiet. You're always acting in accordance with all living beings. But what strikes me is they give rise to happiness because they are mindful of the ability to benefit living beings. So imagine you have a friend like that, a friend who always knows what to say because they see reality for what it is. So if you get into trouble with the law, they can see and they say, don't worry, only this will happen, and you come down, your fear goes away. So they are mindful of being able to benefit living beings. They give rise to happiness because they are mindful of entry into all thus come one's wisdom and experience. And they are happy because they have left all alarming, hair-raising, and other such experiences far behind. They have no fear of death because they understand death. We see death as, poop, what's going to happen? But they know death as just a different experience. They have no fear of the evil destinies because they always do the right thing. They don't even upset any living being, so they have no fear of evil destinies. And the last one is they have no fear of the awesome virtue of the great assembly. What this means is they're so confident and so cool and calm to speak in front of the Buddha, they will be fine. I remember the first time I had to give public speaking, I had to perform public speaking. It was in a room full of, I think, maybe 500 people. And my thoughts were all about myself. Am I going to do a good job? I'm so nervous. And as I was approaching the stage, my hands, I held a piece of paper, and my hands were like this. Fear of speaking. They have no fear. So that's what it means to enter emptiness. And that's really, really important to know, because it gives us an idea of what happens if we cultivate successfully. So, hello? Hello? This will make me sound better. Okay. So to me, that's really good to know. That gives me a lot of courage, a lot of fuel for what I do every day. Because when you enter emptiness, not only there's a joy and happiness that's beyond what the mind can conceive of, but also wisdom arises because you see things as they really are. And that gives you the ability then to help people. I can tell, if my dad was still around, I could tell him exactly what he needed to hear to hopefully have that change. If people have problems, if I have the wisdom, I can help them. I can help my friends, people I care for.
So actually, I thought what Jing Shi just went and explained was really, really helpful for us in cultivation in the following ways. I'm just going to, at least for myself, just reflecting on it, is because this kind of the door of emptiness is put as a kind of like an ideal, something that we're cultivating towards. And oftentimes we go, well, I don't know if I really want that, because we don't quite understand what it's actually about. For instance, maybe another way of looking at it is here in the monastery, everybody's here tonight, we're sitting on the floor, and the room, although it's not freezing cold, we have the heater on. It's not the most exciting place in the world, right? It's and so what are we doing? We're actually, you could say, starting to walk on this process of trying to look into emptiness and finding what that's actually about and maybe cultivating it. So what I see in here in the monastery is that it's, from people looking from the outside world looking in, they often go, wow, it's really miserable there. Gosh, it's these guys are really like suffering, suffer all the time. But actually, in this place, you have the doorway into emptiness. And this emptiness is so profound and so joyful. It's like, wow, I have this great opportunity. And that's the spirit. And if you have that spirit in the cultivation, it makes the cultivation very joyful. It's not a very bitter cultivation. I'm not holding the precepts because I have to just follow these rules and just somebody told me I have to do it, so I have to just do it like this. It's like you're not holding it from that place. You're holding it because I know that if I really want to see things as they are and become fully liberated and completely free and happy and content completely, then I should follow these guidelines I was given and be really relaxed about it and just not cling to anything, just be real cool. And you have that kind of confidence and faith, just naturally you can go in that direction. It's not a forced thing. It's a natural movement of your heart and your mind and your, you can say your awakened nature to what's really happening. So having that, I would say, a clear understanding of where we're moving towards helps us guide us in this process of cultivation. Without it, I think the cultivation can actually feel very bitter and very rigid and very tight if your mind of what the emptiness is about is this kind of like no thought. I can't have any joy. I got to really cultivate my teeth clenched tightly, and I can't eat more than this because it's not too. It's like you're really tight. That's not what it's about. The reason we have all these forms is because it's basically opening the door to this emptiness, and if we can use the form skillfully, it lets us access this. That's the reason behind it. The form has no ultimate principle behind it. It's not, you don't attach to the form. The form is to help us unattach. But the form is really useful because what the Buddha said was, particularly in these precepts, this is just naturally how our awakened nature naturally functions normally. So by holding these things, it's giving us the shape whereby we can get more and more free of the things that we get ourselves into. So I think that the idea of understanding what this emptiness is about is really helpful because it gets us the right direction. We know where we're going. Okay, we're going that way. We're not going towards extinction. Sometimes it gets translated extinction, and I remember oftentimes early in the Dharma talks they go, yeah, it's very strange. It seems like all these Buddhists are after extinction. What's that about? In the early days of translation, now I think Buddhism's come over longer. That now nirvana is a more positive term. Now that's used as a consumer. Now it's used to sell products. And now it got adopted the other way. Now it's used to sell you existence. Buy my drink. I just remember looking at somebody bought this drink at the local store next to 16,000 Buddhas, and on it says, "Taste nirvana." I'm like, wow, that's pretty easy. If you could just buy a drink and get nirvana, it'd be pretty good. So, want to do the next one? Okay.
So then we move on to impermanence. So as the Buddha said, everything's that's made from conditions, which is everything around you, even your thoughts, is not permanent, is not constant. It always changes from one moment to the other. So let's look at something which is inconstant. So if I'm planning a trip to go somewhere, and I have a car, and the car is not really reliable, it might break down at any time, or it might overheat, or the brakes might fail. How can I rely on that car to take me to my destination? I will have absolutely no confidence. So for me, if I knew my brakes were going to fail, or I have failed, or not reliable, one moment it works, the second moment, there's no brakes, and I have to pump the brakes for it to work again. I'm not going to have faith at all in the car. I'm not going to use the car at all. I'm going to get it repaired. If I have a watch that does not tell time, one day it tells time it's slow, the other day it's fast, am I going to rely on the watch? No. So why then do everyone rely on things that are inconstant, impermanent for happiness? I remember before I became a monk, where was my happiness? I always looked for happiness in my clothes. Because I could afford certain things. So all my clothes were specially made, tailor-made for me. When I wore the clothes, I felt I am somebody. The pen, the example I gave earlier. I bought a real expensive pen because I thought I would find happiness in the pen. With the logo right on top, everyone could see. And I would walk. I thought I could find happiness in material things, in trying to buy the most expensive car I could afford, in how I saw myself, in the story, the personality that I built up for myself. And it got me into all kinds of trouble. It never brought me happiness. Even if it did, it was only for a very short period. I thought happiness would come in the form of a phone. I waited and waited and waited for the phone to come out. When I finally bought the phone, I realized that the waiting brought me more joy than actually having the phone. Because now the anticipation was over and I had to use the phone. And all the stories I was telling myself, if I get that phone, I'm going to use it for my business. I'm going to write documents on it. People are going to see me as someone, blah, 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 blah. But it turned out the phone was a dud. It didn't really work very well. And I didn't use all the features because I didn't need to. But I just wanted the phone. So when I got the phone, pop, satisfaction level down. And then the cycle began again. I'm looking for the next thing. Samsung, right? The next big thing, the next best thing. When they advertise against Apple. So we look for happiness in things that are never permanent, in relationships, in careers, in finance, in a lot of things. And at the same time, if we understand that, if we see things for what they are, and we try to temper ourselves with that wisdom, it's fine. But most people like myself just blindly go through life doing that. Always searching for things, always searching for happiness or satisfaction in things that will not last or will not give me that lasting satisfaction. So the Buddha's passing away, in the Mahaparinibbana Sutra, the Lord Chakra uttered this verse, and this verse is uttered by all Theravada monks if they are at a funeral. It says, "Impermanent are all component things. They arise and cease, that is their nature. They come into being and pass away. Release from them is bliss supreme." So it says, impermanent are all component things. Component meaning things that come from the elements. Things, even thoughts, impermanent. They arise and cease. Cup, right now, if I let go, cup no more. Shards of ceramic, shards of clay, right? They come into being and they pass away, come into being and pass away.
So, let me do the photo. I'll do the photo one. Okay.
So I thought of an example, and when I went home recently, my brother visited me from Singapore, and it was really embarrassing. If he's listening to this, he had a selfie stick. Does anyone know what a selfie stick is? It's like a broom handle, like a telescopic broom handle, and then you put your phone at the end, and you hold it like that, and you can take a picture of yourself or the whole group. It's actually really, really practical, because you can have everyone in the photo. You don't need someone to hold the camera. So it's called a selfie stick, right? So I thought about taking photos. People take photos all the time. Why? You're trying to preserve a moment in time. Maybe deep inside we all know that things are not permanent. Memories, instances come and go, come and go. And a snap, a photograph preserves that memory. But if you look at it objectively, even memories don't last. Memories get corrupted. I remember sitting here, I'm not sure when, maybe less than a year ago, and I told a story about how I was young, and my mother would chase me around the house if I was naughty with a cane. And I was so sure of that memory. And then when I went home recently, my mom said, "That never happened. It never happened at all." I said, "Are you sure?" So I trusted in the memory that I had when I was maybe 5, 6 years old, or maybe even 11, 12 years old. I was a late bloomer. And I really trusted that memory was real. But mothers knows best, right? So my mom said, "That never happened. How could you tell everyone that I did that? Now people will think that I'm such a bad mother." I was like, "That never happened? I'm sure that happened, no?" So people take photos to try to preserve memories, but memories itself are not reliable. And in the photo itself, photos fade, or you get new photos. And even if the photos do last, like I said earlier, my body will betray me. So what use of the photo then for me? What kind of memory does it preserve for me?
So if we looked at the principle of impermanence, what it connected with the liberation door of marklessness, and so I thought was an interesting reflection with the idea of the photo, is because when you're taking the photo, you're actually making a mark, you're creating a form, right? And so it's like the opposite. It's like you're using this kind of idea of permanence to create a mark. But what you're doing with impermanence is you could say something the opposite, is that by understanding impermanence, you understand there's nothing that can be marked and in this kind of form forever. Nothing is just like this, like this, like this. In fact, it's this flow of experiences. There's nothing that you can put your mark on and say this is what it is. I think a lot of people try to put their mark on things to give them a sense of permanence. I know, that's why a lot of graffiti happens. People go and try to graffiti something because it gives them a sense like I put my mark on something. Dogs do that for sure, right? As dogs, they put their marks on things. I don't know exactly what's in their mind. Maybe they're marking out territory. But if we understood impermanence, we would have realized that we don't have to leave our mark on anything, because everything's impermanent. We can leave our mark for a certain period of time, but in the end, there's nothing there. There's nothing to hold on to. And so, for this bodhisattva at this ground, he's of course much more profound than how I just described it. And maybe this is where you can say I'm at, or where I think where many of us are at. But for him, he actually says that he contemplates the limbs of existence as all in their own nature being extinguished and ultimately liberated without the production of the slightest mark of dharmas. So it's all extinguished, and from that, nothing is completely free of any creation of any marks whatsoever. Everything is seen through. And what Jigonshu was talking about is through impermanence. He sees everything ultimately will come to an end, is extinguished. Therefore, there's not a mark that is left over. So it's basically, you could say, a contemplation that you can do is when you see things, you could just see it as not for sure. It's not going to be always like that. And I think that's a very helpful reflection to have. I know I do that quite a lot. Actually, to be honest, I do that quite a lot in my meditation. We're supposed to be doing Chan, but since my mind is so overly active, I mostly sit in there just telling myself, not for sure, let go. Not for sure, let go. No, I really want to do this. No. At the end, it's not going to really work out. Everything just falls apart in the end. Yeah, but I really want, no, let go, okay. And if I tell myself enough, like 45 minutes for an hour, just telling myself that, my mind like a little bit relaxes from this kind of kind of aggressive achievement-based mind that wants to grab onto something and go do something. It's like, okay, it's kind of just teasing the mind a little bit to kind of like release its grasp on something so tightly, just to kind of say, really look at it. Okay, it's not going to last. Don't put so much stock in it. Why are you projecting out all this stuff that's kind of fantasy land? But you could just go back to something really concrete. That the Buddha taught impermanence. Don't attach. Let go. And so I felt that be very, very valuable. And it, to be honest, it's kept me out of a lot of trouble. I could definitely see I would have caught myself in a lot of trouble in many ways. I did get myself in trouble in many ways, but it's kept me out of trouble kept me out of trouble in other ways. From basically trying that reflection on a regular basis, is basically seeing all these things that we're trying to go for, that we're looking to succeed in, to see, in the end, that's going to be impermanent. So not to say don't try my best in helping something that's going to be wholesome be successful, but don't attach to the success. Don't attach to the result and hope that result will always be like that. Because who knows what can happen? Nothing's for sure, But I can still try my best to plant the right causes, but don't worry about what's going to happen in the future. Don't try to hold on to something as a way that's going to be forever, So that's a really helpful reflection. I mean, for instance, to be really concrete, the university, I think people have talked about quite a few times here, is a really, I think, a meaningful project that I think is going to have a it'd be a very important role in the world in terms of helping bring forth wisdom and wholesomeness. But in the end, everything's impermanent. That will cease. And so don't get attached. Don't get attached to anything that's going on. But doesn't mean don't participate and put in the good seeds to make something flourish.
So what happens if we don't have a balanced view of life? So because our discriminating mind, we can't help but get attached to things, because that's the way the mind functions. We can't help but allow the mind to pull us into sadness or happiness, anger, jealousy, hatred, if the mind wants to. So there's this story during the Buddha's time. A mother came to the Buddha. This young woman came to the Buddha holding her dead baby. And she was out of her mind, as you would expect. She was distraught, and her mind could not see things straight. And she came to the Buddha because she was crying, she was wailing, and she said, "The Buddha, I'm sure of all the people, the Buddha can bring my baby back to life. The Buddha can do that." So she went to the Buddha, crying, "Buddha, please bring my baby back to life." So the Buddha understood what was going on. And instead of saying yes or no, he said, "Okay, to do that, first, you have to bring me a mustard seed from a house that has never encountered death." So a mustard seed is a common herb that is used in Indian cooking. You see it everywhere if you eat any Indian food. So he said, "Bring me a mustard seed from a house that has not seen a single death. And if you can collect 100 mustard seeds from 100 different houses, I will do as you wish." So the woman, okay. She ran to the first house she could find. And because back in those times, those houses would normally have at least 3 generations. There would be extended families, and it would be ancestral homes. So she went to the house and said, "Do you have any mustard seeds?" And the owner of the house would say, "Yes, we do have mustard seeds." Then her second question would be, "Has anyone died in this house before?" And the question would be, "Yep, someone, in fact, my uncle just died 2 weeks ago." And she would run to the next house. "Do you have any mustard seeds?" And the answer will always be yes. Second question, "Has anyone died here?" Also always yes. So she went to a third house, a fourth house, a fifth house. It's not clear how many houses she went to, but ultimately she came to her own realization. That's the nature of things. And it's not that her grief disappeared, it just helped her not be controlled by it. And she said, and she calmed down. And she was no longer, you could say, in almost like being caught in a cycle of insanity. And the grief just passed over time. So being able to always view life as things are not impermanent. So I can't help myself but get attached. But at the same time, you also try to pull yourself back. And when things happen, then okay, that's the nature of life. That's the nature of things. And then go on.
So we're a little bit past time. So I just want to just mention the last one so people just see it, and maybe at the next lecture we'll go more into it. But basically that was the link between dukkha, or suffering, or unsatisfactoriness, and wishlessness. But what I wanted to particularly point out was that the Bodhisattva here says something very interesting. He says he has no hopes or expectations, right? Because this is on page 23, top page 23, except for taking great compassion as foremost to teach and transform sentient beings. And right then the liberation door of wishlessness manifests before him. So when you really see, all those things are suffering, why would you want it? Because you know it's not going to satisfy, right? So Bodhisattva, however, it says here, is except for taking great compassion as foremost. So this is very compassionate about the bodhisattva. So he'll pick up this item that's got suffering in it because of great compassion to teach and transform living beings. You know, he's out there in the trenches doing the tough work, knowing that ultimately these are meaningless things that will probably create more suffering. But he helped that person who's over there also, who's suffering over there, he's going to join them in the work so that one day when that person realizes this is just too much suffering, he can say, you know, there's a way out. Let me show you the way out. Like, oh, okay, let me follow you. And the bodhisattva is willing to do that. And that's really compassionate.
So he's not just not just enjoying the fruits of emptiness, blissful joy, calmness, well-being, but he wants everyone to join him. And that's really natural if you think about it. If you, one day, you too encounter emptiness, the first thing that will come to your mind would to be grateful. It is said that when people's practitioners' wisdom first arises, the first thing they do is they look for their mother. And that happens in the Ulambana Sutra. Venerable Mahamoggana, when his wisdom opened up, the first thing he did was to look for his mother. And then what you want is also to look for the rest of your loved ones. And say, hey, wake up. Because all this stress that you're undergoing, all this unhappiness in life that you have to endure looking for happiness, you already have it. You just have to walk this path and it will be everlasting. And you don't have to suffer anymore.
So that's a good note to end on. So I don't know if there's anyone have just any questions at all, or things people would like to say, or anything that was not clear, or even corrections if you thought, well, that didn't make sense from what I understood of the Dharma. We're happy to get feedback. If not, we have probably a couple of announcements. One is that we're continuing on with our Saturday Chan. So next week is the last Saturday Chan. So you haven't had a chance to come yet, next week's your last chance. After that, we're going to be going back to our regular Saturday schedules, which is also really good because you can do the repentance ceremony or bow the Universal Door chapter. But if you would like to meditate, next week we still have a full, pretty much half day or full day of meditation. What else? The classes basically are still on break. We will be starting again after the school semester starts in DRBU. Right now, there are two classes that are still continuing on, which is the Wednesday night Stephen Tainer class and the Thursday night East Bay Insight Meditation. You could say, would be called a Dharma talk maybe, that happens every Thursday. So those are continuing on. Otherwise, we're still on break for next week. Is there anything else that's important to announce, Marek, or you can think of anything? No? Okay. So what we do... By themselves? Okay. So YC was saying that the elders... What time? Start at 3. Okay, 3 to 4. So there's a really wonderful practice, which is to recite the Buddha's name with elders, because you can think about it. When we that time of our lives, it's really, what can we do that's really valuable is to recite the Buddha's name, because we're getting to the place of rebirth. And so if we would like to go, it's from 3 to 4 we have a nearby elders home that's a kind of like a friend of the monastery, and then you go there to recite. So usually we go there as a group from the monastery, but because we're having a chan here, I think YC is recommending everybody go there directly. And I think if you're interested in going, maybe talk with YC if you don't know where it is, right? Okay. Okay, so if there's nothing else, we do the transference. So the transference of merit, you'll see on the back of your sheet, called Dedication of Merit. And how this works is, from this evening, sitting here, learning the Dharma together, it's a lot of goodness. And by that goodness, what we want to do is not hold it to ourselves, but share it with other people. And there's a sense that this goodness is not, there's actually really something there. And by really giving it out, it not just is given to somebody else, but actually expands, because that act of goodness shared is itself an act of goodness, and it just kind of magnifies on and on and on and on. And so if we really open our hearts as wide as possible, the merit just expands limitlessly. So if we can use the verse to help inspire our hearts, but in our hearts, what's most important is we really make a wish to do something with it, wherever we want. Okay. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Okay. So let's stand up and bow to the Buddhas. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. Namo Tassa Bhagavate